Okay. Hey, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Raymore City Council work session for Monday, February the 6th, 2023. We have a couple of presentations on our agenda tonight, and I will turn it over to Mr. Fearborn at this time.
Thank you, Your Honor. We have some familiar faces with us tonight to talk to us about updates on their respective projects that they are proposing for the city. It appears that our first presenter, Kurt Peterson, Jake, welcome back. Have a very, very thick packet, so I'm not going to waste any of the council's time and let them dive into it as briefly as they can.
That's the cue.
Hey,
Go right ahead.
Just making sure. Again, I'm Kurt Peterson. You have Matt Tapp here and Jake Lovelace, both from Griffin Riley. We are here to discuss Timber Trails, the proposed mixed-use project that we talked about. This is incredible. I had to cheat and go back and look. It's been 7 months. It was last summer. Wow. Kind of feels like yesterday, but it wasn't. So with that, I want to assure you that as we were excited about this, we were preparing and deciding, what to present. We decided to go quickly, but still provide all the content, because if you're like me, 7 months is a long time. And so please understand as we go through that this is a big opportunity for us. So it's not that we're trying to belabor anything. We just want to make sure it's in front of you as you kind of re-engage and digest with the facts and all that. So with that, I'm going to dive right in. Okay, that's all right. So the project site, as Matt will flip slides as we go along, you all have the packet, which is good in front of you as well. The project site is about 22 acres down there off of the 71 frontage, the outer road on the west, on Dean Avenue there on the east, and then Benton House is just to the south of the 22 acres. Obviously very visible, much, I guess you could really call it a gateway in some sense, at least coming from the south. So we have treated it that way from the very first time I was brought on by Griffin Riley to look at this, that it is a gateway and it needs to look nothing short of excellent for the city. In terms of the project itself, it's a mixed-use project that has 3 different components, taking them one by one. The first is a multifamily component, about 300 multifamily luxury units across 4 buildings, as you can see on the screen in front of you. It's the yellow buildings. The smallest yellow building in the middle is the clubhouse. You have all the high-end amenities that you're used to seeing in the metro with these types of products, the pool and outdoor amenities, and of course all the clubhouse amenities. And then all the nice finishes and everything you have in the units that you expect at these highest class multifamily communities. These buildings are approximately 4 stories. I say approximately because there's some step downs in the land that create some 3-story components and a 5-story component. But generally speaking, these are 4-story buildings. That gives you a quick taste. Moving on the site plan to the second part of the mixed use community, which is the retail. That is the red building over on Dean Avenue there in the southeast corner. That's approximately 14,000 feet. It's intended to be a multi-tenant, multi-user, multi-business building. And then lastly, in the opposite corner, up in the northwest, along the outer road, is what we conceive of being a hotel. We think that is a good hotel site. No, it's not up at Main and Main, right at the interchange, but we think it still has really good visibility, and we'd like to see what probably would be typically about an 80 to 85 key or room hotel here. Could this end up being more retail? It could be, but our 100% goal as we talk to potential flags and operators would be to have a hotel there first and foremost. Next, let's flip to some elevations here. These are intended to give you a sense of the quality and the look of these mixed-use components. So I think we have a couple slides. You can see the apartments there on the left, a clubhouse view there on the right for the multifamily. Then you have some retail rendering here, looking at that building we looked at, and then just a conceptual idea of what the kind of hotel quality we'd be looking at there. So just some renderings. Next, and again, this will be fast. If you remember, it's about 2 minutes, but I think gives you a really good look. There's really 2 things we want to fly through, literally. One is going to be Timber Trails, which is our project, and obviously it's rendered, right, conceptual, because it doesn't exist. But we'll walk through and you'll be able to see all 3 components that I just spoke of. And then right after that, we'll follow with a quick fly through of something real, right? Because pictures are good, but reality, or renderings are good, but reality is also helpful, and that's going to be of our echelon community in Lee Summit. That'll give you a real sense of the quality for the multifamily. So we can get going with this when you're ready. This is going to fly through.
What you guys are looking at right now are obviously renders of this entire project, the hotel coming up here, the retail and the multifamily components that we show in these renders are all existing projects. So the residential, the multifamily component that we have on this project is, they're the same renders that we proposed and were approved over in Lee Summit that we're getting ready to start construction on. The retail site that we have on this project is a retail site that we built over, again, in Lee Summit at 50 and 50 and Todd George in Lee Summit. So those are existing projects, and these are, like I said, the finishes that we have on those projects. Similar amenities, fire pit, exactly as we've laid out on, this is the residences at Blackwell. Those are the same renders that we have, the same elevations that we have over there. Tuck under garages, private access to elevator service buildings. What's that? And like I said, that's the retail elevation that we have over at 50 and Todd George, right next to the Tractor Supply and the new Culvers that went in there.
So we're going to not fly through echelon. We were just conversing back here. You guys can have us go back to it if that's helpful, because I was also remembering some of you, at least according to Mr. Fairborn, I think, Mr. Fairborn, I'm not putting words in your mouth, a number of people may have had the chance to visit in person.
I have,
echelon, and I know you
I
have.
can't speak for
Okay,
the
got it. I won't extrapolate. But anyway, you guys can have us go back to that for time's sake if you'd like to see it. But the whole point of the fly-through and the renderings and showing you echelon is to make sure you understand that this developer is proposing quality. You can hold their feet to the fire. They're showing you quality, and quality is where it ends. And why is that important? As you'll see in a minute, from the very beginning we said there has to be a value proposition that makes sense for the city, or you shouldn't support a public-private partnership, period. So we either convince you of that in the materials, the facts convince you of that, or you probably should take a pass on this. So that's our burden to prove to you. Quality, quality, quality. So the next quick item we wanted to hit on that we didn't even touch on this summer, in reflection we thought we probably should have, is making a quick pass through Raymore's 2017 strategic plan. And again, I could spend 10 minutes on it. I'm going to spend 1 minute on it just to get that topic out there, because I know that's something that's important to the city. So some of the elements of that are found with this proposed mixed-use project are first impressions is one of the items there. Obviously, big impression on 49 as you're coming north. Second, and what I'm reading to you are elements, right, that you know of this plan. The second is expanding the commercial tax base, obviously with the hotel, or if the hotel was more retail, and then that multi-tenant commercial building, we're expanding the commercial tax base. Next, cultivating a climate for prosperous business growth. So this is a huge item. One is rooftops. We talk about that with single family, but we also talk about it with multifamily, especially this type of multifamily that brings residents that have a lot of disposable income, because then folks go and spend it, and that helps our city's businesses. Also, again, you have the additional retail and hotel, which helps, again, grow businesses in the city. And the last is quality, diverse housing options. So this is quality from our perspective. We think that aligns with the plan, which is seen in materials, it's seen in amenities, whether it's elevators, it's seen in just overall quality, as I hope you're already seeing emanating from the pictures you've seen here. So again, a quick touch on the strategic plan is to see why we think we are proposing something new that's in line with the city's 2017 plan. Now to the proposed incentives. This is the public-private partnership that has been presented to the city. It goes element by element of the 3 elements of the mixed-use proposal. First, with the multifamily, there's 2 components, as you can see on the screen. A sales tax exemption on construction materials from the Chapter 100 program, right? So it reduces your project cost up front, so you don't have to pay Missouri sales and use tax on your materials. And then second is a 25-year fixed pilot. Now, there was some discussion, really spearheaded, I think I could say, by Mr. Fairborn and his staff this summer about, well, what should that be? Is that an abatement? Is it not an abatement? And there was a directive, kind of informally and formally, honestly, to go and work with the Cass County Assessor's Office and establish for this project, what would the Assessor's Office put this on the books for, and then come back and propose a pilot that is 100% consistent with that. And so I will not put words in Mr. Fairborn's mouth. I'm sure he'll address this on his own, but I will say we did do just that. And so the pilot that's being proposed now, which is different from this last summer, is $1,426 per unit, then with an inflator that kicks in every other year to give that a natural rise over that 25-year period. And again, while this is not an abatement, it's extremely important for this kind of a very, very expensive, high capital investment project because it creates predictability, which I said it once, I'll kind of end, is a really big deal for this kind of investment, to have that kind of predictability from a tax perspective. The second of the 3 components when it comes to the incentives relates to the retail. And like the multifamily, it would have a sales tax exemption on its construction materials to help with that upfront cost savings, and then have a 25-year pilot. This one would be different. We call what is proposed with the multifamily a fixed pilot because it's a number, right? And then grows based on what the assessor's office gave us when we worked with them. The retail would be a 50% abatement that would grow every other year as well with an inflator. But it would float with whatever the assessor's office would put it on the books for at the time. It's a little harder to estimate what that would be, but then you say, well, why is this important? This is important for the retail because leases like this are almost always triple net leases, which means that any sort of taxes, insurance, common area maintenance, all pass through in the lease to the tenant. So if taxes are higher, who pays for it? Not the landlord in general, but the tenant. So to attract commercial tenants, especially when we're not on the highway, right? Either highway, we're down Dean Avenue. This is not, I don't need to tell you guys this. This is, we call it not first tier, right? This is whatever, a second tier location. Does that mean we don't want to do any retail? Absolutely not. We're proposing to build this retail, but it is extremely helpful to have a 50% abatement so that when we can advertise to our potential tenants, look, you're going to pay half the taxes you paid somewhere else. It helps induce them to come down Dean Avenue and be part of this mixed-use development. So very, very helpful and important to make that a success. Now, there's something really unique here, and I say this as not a Griffin Riley person, a big fan and a partner of theirs, but somebody that has the privilege of representing developers all over the metro and the country. And what I'm about to say is not unique in terms of it's never happened, but unique in the sense that it is not common, particularly ever since 2009 and that whole real estate experience that we had, which is this. Without any tenants in hand, as the multifamily is built, phase 1, this developer is proposing in this city at this site to build that approximately 14,000 feet of really nice building materials, quality design, retail, period. People don't do that. People wait and say, look, I'm interested in building commercial, but I'm going to wait until I have 50% of the building leased and then I can get my bank loan and all that. Again, Griffin Riley is saying this is a mixed-use development from the beginning. We will build this retail, and we believe it may be harder because it's down Dean Avenue, but with the 50% abatement, we're going to work hard and we'll set the table. We can't promise tenants at any given time. We can't even promise a given type of tenant. We're going to get the best tenant possible, and we're going to set the table by spending millions of dollars to have the building they're waiting for. That was the second. The third and final piece of the proposed public-private partnership is that hotel you saw up on the outer road in the northwest corner of the site. I already mentioned it one time. We want a hotel. We believe in getting a hotel there. If we can't, then we'll bring some sort of commercial, but we're going to do everything possible until the market would tell us that it's impossible. Again, we think we can get it done. And here, the proposed incentive has just one piece to it. It would be, please allow us to have a sales tax exemption on the construction materials. Here's how we would use that responsibly. when we're going to the best flags we can find that don't have a presence in this submarket right here, we get to say, by the way, if your hotel costs fill in the blank X, it's actually going to cost, I'm making up numbers, right? Because we don't have real numbers in front of us. It's going to cost 95% or 90% of that, or even something better than that, because we have a sales tax exemption as part of this overall development that allow you to reduce your construction costs. It helps us get a flag. It helps us compete with the remaining flags that are not in the submarket. That was a quick run through the proposed incentive structure, which of course available to answer any questions about that. But what we want to end with is, again, not to be presumptuous, but I think the prism with which you'll evaluate this project, whether it ends up being something you support, again, we're not doing that tonight, this is informational, and there's formal process after this, but ultimately, when you make a decision on what you think about this proposed project, you're gonna look at it as to, does it bring net value to the city or does it not? So, there may be some of you that question whether there should be any sort of multifamily portion of this. And we mentioned this last summer, because I just want to kind of get that out there. Some people may say, do I want any more apartments, whether they're high-end or not? Do I want any apartments at this site? So from the developer's perspective, we would say, one, the economics of the mixed-use project, these three pieces, don't work without the multifamily. Full stop. We can elaborate if people want to get deeper on that. And then second, without the overall proposed public-private partnerships on the three pieces, also kind of the three-legged stool here doesn't stand up. So the question is not, from our perspective, from a policy perspective, whether you came to the meeting dying for and looking for more multifamily tonight. The question is, would the city be better off at this site, this property, with this mixed-use project? And if not, is there something else? Because that's fair, right? Is there some other realistic project that the city could see for this particular piece of property? Because it's our burden to show you that this is the best project and the best economics for the city at this site. So the first reality that's important when we ask ourselves that question, like, do we want this at this site, is what else could go here? And I'm doing a fast version of what we talked about this summer, which is, well, let's go through it. There's not an infinite number of types of developments that can go on 22 acres, right? Located here. One, could it be single family? I mean, in theory, right? But pretty much no, because there's just single family developers don't choose to put, nowadays, there's some decades old product, but don't choose to put nice single family, I should say, up against the outer road, which is effectively up against the highway. They just don't. And I think you probably can agree with me, just kind of crawling around town in the metro and seeing where the nice residential go. It's not where people go. There's other land they can pick. And then if it's not that, then is it retail? Is it 22 acres of retail? Is it whatever Sam's 2.0 is? And the answer there is, I can especially tell you, ever since 09, it's so hard to get any sort of big box. So hard. In fact, it's really hard to get junior box. So the bottom line is, filling up 22 acres with retail, we're thrilled of the idea of bringing hopefully a hotel and 14,000 feet of multi-tenant. It's really, really hard. There's just not 22 acres of retail waiting out there. You can say industrial. I think we all agree. Got another great spot where you have industrial. This is probably not your number one industrial choice off Dean Avenue. So what does that leave us with? Possibly some other kind of, but unless it's a project like this, maybe some townhomes. There's certainly townhomes are an important part of the ecosystem. But we think what this proposed project brings, particularly with the multifamily, is something that attracts and provides a place for that higher income rental that has some huge benefits. I mean, there's no project like this. There's some really exciting projects that have been approved, and there's some that have been built, but nothing has the combination of tuck-under garages and secure interior hallways and elevators. Nothing that's been approved. It's a different product. And we think it is going to attract the young professionals, the empty nesters, and the people with the most discretionary income. That right there is a big deal, we think, for the city. We talked about this summer examples of that. Again, I'm doing a brief treatment of it, the sticky effect, where people come and they rent, young professionals, let's say, right? And they go, I really like Raymore. I don't think I need to sell you on Raymore. There's reasons to be here. And they end up buying homes, right? Or building homes, even better. Also, that can be the turnover effect, where people go in and ultimately buy homes, right, out of the apartments, and that causes people that are older to move out of those to somewhere else, and then people put money into the homes and fix them up, and that helps entire neighborhoods, right, kind of blossom again. And then we have people come in just to be near grandchildren. So there's all these effects that having housing stock at that high end can have on your community. So lastly, a couple slides on economic impact. So over this proposed 25-year period where this public-private partnership would exist, the taxing jurisdictions, inclusive of the city, would be estimated to get approximately 14 million. And let me be clear, that's if the public-private partnership's in place. That's not, hey, Kurt, if you built all this and there was no public-private partnership, this is, too bad. That's what the taxing jurisdictions would. This is, with all that in place that I summarized earlier, for about $14 million of benefit. And that is just property taxes. That doesn't take into account that we call it the multiplier effect of everybody that comes and has income and goes and spends and help businesses who hire people and more businesses come. That has nothing to do with that. That's all on top of the $14 million. So we think this project would have a really, really helpful, positive impact on the city. By the way, residents feel the same way. And this is all empirical data. I didn't want to pound the presentation with 10 more minutes. But there's tons of data on CoStar and other services that you can see. This type of project and all of the comparable nice communities all around Raymore have unbelievably low vacancy, meaning people want this product and there's not enough of it, especially here in Raymore. So the market is kind of calling for it. So getting near the end here of the presentation, we want to talk about, lastly, school kids, because that's, the quality of the schools and the financial grounding of the school district is a backbone for every good city, period, right? Period. And so we take that really seriously. So we wanted to run through some numbers with you. First, so there's always the question of a project like this, a high-end multifamily, mixed-use community, but here we're talking about the multifamily. How many school kids end up coming? The good news is, even since the summer, we have some more super applicable data. It's data, it's empirical that you can think about, and I want to put into a formula right here so we can evaluate how the school district would be negatively or positively affected by this project. So first, we have empirical data from the lofts, which really shows a very small number of students across their units, only about 10 students. There's a couple different metrics, by the way, when people try to do apples to apples about kids. We're using right here on the screen, how many kids per 100 units. I could give you, if people start saying, what about this, what about that? I could explain the other ways we talk about it, but just to keep it consistent, that's what's on the screen. So 2.5 kids per 100 units there. There's a Lee Summit multifamily project that I was involved with over the last few years. Exciting project in Lee Summit that yielded about 2.2 students per 100. There's another project by North Point Development in two projects, actually, 2 phases, one called Summit Square, one the Donovan and Lee Summit, that also just came into play. The first was about 4 or 5 years ago, and the Donovan's very recently. And they're seeing about 5 students per 100. And then Echelon, again, which Griffin Riley was the developer for, was looking at about 6.5 students per 100. And finally, another project that I was a part of in Lee Summit that's about 5 years ago, has had lots of time to see how many students come, and that was about 6.6. So why did I just run through all that and take up all your time with it? Because this has been a topic when we met with the school district last summer. I just know there's plenty of discussion that would not just Raymore, but other cities when they talk to their school districts. And so when you look at this truly empirical data, part of the public record, you can see some sources there at the bottom. The question becomes, okay, let's pick the high end of that. Let's pick 6.5 school kids per 100. Let's assume that happened here at this proposed project. So across 300 units, that's about 19 to 20 students. So then we do some math to see how would this affect the school district. The school district's net cost per student is somewhere in the range of $9,000. So let's take $9,000 times 20 children. That's $180,000. Let's put that in red, right? That's a cost. If this project brought to the community 20 more children, high end of the range, that'd be about $180,000 a year of additional cost to the school district. So the question is, how much does this project bring to the school district in the way of real property tax revenues with the incentives in place? And here's the answer. So with that proposed pilot I talked about of $1,431 per unit per year, with the inflator going forward, if you just take that first year amount times the number of units, times the percentage of the school district's real property tax levy take, which is about 61.5%, that creates revenue of $264,000. And you compare the $264,000 to the $180,000, and you're immediately in the black or in the green, however you think of it, of about $84,000. So the school district literally, no black magic, right? Literally, empirical data is better off revenue-wise with this project. By the way, note what I left out. I left out the hotel, potential hotel, and I left out the retail, which have their own property taxes they generate and certainly don't generate any school kids. If you add in those assumptions, you're at somewhere in the range of, I'm going fast, so we don't dig too deep unless you want to, about $185,000 in the black for the school district when the project's completely built out. So the reason we said all that is we take the school district seriously, backbone of any community, and we would put before you for your consideration this project because of just empirical data will actually help the school district financially, not hurt them, certainly not hurt them. Deep breath, we're very excited to be here, try to go quickly to respect your time, but we would take as much time as you would like us to answer questions. We know while there's no decisions here at all that are made, we write down everything you say, and we are ready, hopefully, to move forward after this through the formal process, but want to make sure we've listened to everything that is on your mind and answered your questions.
So Kurt,
Sir.
kind of remind us again, the incentivizations have changed a little bit from your last presentation. Can you kind of explain the difference between
difference, yeah.
the last to now?
Yeah, it's actually, with all that I just said, that was my apology at the beginning, that much of it is repetitive, but hopefully in a refreshing way. What really changed is we came in with, on the multifamily piece, so one of the three pieces, we had come in and asked for a fixed pilot that was lower than this. The one we're proposing now is based absolutely on our discussions with Cass County. So with a short answer, that's what changed.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Anybody else have any questions? John?
Any anchor tenants on the retail that you're in talks with? I know we had discussed before having an anchor tenant like a sit-down restaurant, which I know they're hard to come across. Something like that I think would impact this. Anything like that in the works?
I know we don't have LOIs, Jake. Is there anything you would at all add to the?
What our next step will be in this process is to bring in NGZs, typically who our partner is on projects like this, and absolutely, that'll be the very first thing that we do is once we get you guys' support to move through something like this is to go out and target tenants just like that. Absolutely.
But nothing right now.
Kevin, did you have something?
Yeah, my question was on the incentives. The incentives, are they tied to, obviously there's three different, the apartments, the retail, and the hotel. And my question is if, say the hotel doesn't happen, and that has to go retail, does that get the, would it get the 50% abatement on retail, or would
Funny,
it go
we
back?
talked about this. It's, I mean, to be honest, that exact internal discussion happened, and we felt like so as not to be perceived as trying to change the rules, or maybe they're going to try to get away from a hotel and go back to retail because the retail would have an abatement. The request we decided on was no matter what, for that physical space right there, just to keep it at the sales tax exemption. Obviously, the governing body could decide to go more than that, but the ask is just to keep it at sales tax exemption for that reason.
So we're looking at, would we separate it by the inner project, or would there be like a PUD put together and with an MOU that each one of these, is that what we're looking to do, something like this?
And before I answer, are you thinking land use world, like zoning and plan approval, or are you thinking incentives, so I can answer your question right? Yeah, sure. So I would work with legal counsel for the city, but from my perspective, not responding for Mr. Fairborn or for legal counsel for the city, I would suggest it would probably be some sort of, we call it a master chapter 100, where you try to make sure it's one cohesive approach with an associated development agreement. That's the way I would see it.
And the key word in there is associated development agreement. Over time, I have been directing Mr. Gress and Sid Douglas, our special counsel, that we need to take a long look at the new development agreements, remembering that we're the landlord. And we need to exercise significant oversight and control of the project as long as we're the landlord. And so we began that process in earnest with Watermark, and it took a long time to get that agreement through. But things like inspections and what things are going to look like and what role the city's going to play over the life of this and what we are going to be able to say can and cannot go into these. And I alerted Kirk to that when we had our pre-meeting discussion on Friday, which we always do with the developers. The other significant change, and he's brought it up, my more simplistic approach to it, the council may remember that relative to the incentive on the multifamily, I had told you in the summer that we were not in a good spot because we had a disagreement on the underlying formula that was being used to get to the numbers that were associated with the incentive package that was being asked. So my direction to the developer was, I will not be able to recommend to the council anything short of you going to the county assessor and not using an income method, but actually using a property valuation just like it would be on a single-family residence. I want to know what Roger would say after he sees your developmentally summit, after he sees exactly what is being proposed in totality for this location. What is his assessed valuation going to be if no incentives were in place? What's that property going to be worth on a market value and assessed value? That is the number they're coming to the council with tonight. It is full assessed valuation on this property. What they are asking for, in essence, is two things within the incentive. And I don't want to speak, I mean, again, there's a degree of neutrality here, but they're asking for the sales tax exemption on everything, and they are asking for a known multiplier moving forward of the 1.5% every 2 years. So they know exactly what those taxes are going to be, but the starting point is not a reduced starting point. It's 100%.
Anybody else? Anything as this washes over you? Mr. Townsend, you have something? Okay. All right. Yeah, Jason?
So I'm curious from either side. The outer road was built quite some time ago to specs of the day. It's a basic 2-lane asphalt road that you go to the south and you've got the 90-degree curve, if you will. Do we anticipate major changes to that? I mean, if you're talking about putting hotel, retail, and a number of apartments, I would anticipate we're going to have some major improvements, at least to a small segment of that road at some point in the future if that development were to go in and be fully occupied. And so I didn't know if that had been thought about at this point, or that's too far in the weeds.
It's not too far in the weeds. I do believe we've had some conversation with MoDOT about, they're the ones, I believe, on that outer road that dictate the standards on it. And then I know that we've had a traffic study that was done on it as well. I'd need to refresh myself on exactly what it said. Obviously, we'd be back in front of you guys where you'd have the opportunity to look at that traffic study and everything with our PDP. But I do believe MoDOT said that back actually towards 58, it was an area that we would need to look at together just to see how everything would flow through back up towards 58.
Kind of along that subject, I know we talked about a street that it is not finished there, but yet it would alleviate some of that traffic. Is that, I don't see anywhere that you guys have talked about touching that, or I think it's Johnson.
Are you referencing Johnson Drive?
Yeah.
And we've had some discussions with staff on that particular segment of road, and I don't know exactly where staff's at. We presented this, and obviously we've been working through some different things, so with you guys' guidance, we'll circle back around with staff and we'll update some of those different conversations. I don't know if staff has any current information on that, but on our end, we'd need to circle back around with staff and see exactly how all that work was going to be completed.
But this time, no, you guys aren't touching it. Or
And
looking at.
at next stage is when we'll discuss getting back in front of that as well.
The connection on Johnson Drive was actually a bond issue, and we were going to enter into a development agreement with the developer Alera, who has since abandoned the city, on that particular project. We have actually put out the specs again to just go ahead and proceed to get Johnson Drive done now. I mean, we're gonna have to pay for it. We want to get it in. Let's get it in.
And if somehow that tied back into, when we were completing our project or starting construction on our project, and we could work out something directly with the city that was beneficial for the city and us, then absolutely we would want to help out everybody there.
Sir, could I ask a question? Sure. Thank you. Let's say that the hotel doesn't go. What would the footprint of the retail be if the hotel doesn't go? I guess it would be equivalent to the ground floor of the hotel, right?
Could be single user too, though.
Yeah, so Kurt mentioned that it could be a single user as well, and I think we could potentially reconfigure that parking lot space to where I think we could actually have 2 pad sites there in that location is one of the different concepts that we looked at before. We had heard a hotel pretty loudly from some other folks on this project. And so, yeah, we have a couple different opportunities, I believe, with that space because it is well parked. That's what that's what leads to what your overall unit count is, the key count inside the hotel. And so we would have a couple options with that, sir.
And as I had spoken to the council, one of the harsher things that will be in this development agreement is that if a hotel does not go, they can't go back with multifamily. It's got to be retail.
That's right.
Mr. Townsend?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
We're good now?
Yes, I'm going to talk out my thoughts here.
All right.
Mr. Shrewsbury, earlier you said that this is 100% abatement early in the project, so could you clarify just from our understanding here, as I'm looking through the 3 asks between the apartments, retail, and hotel, obviously the apartment portion has the abatement numbers and the, assessor numbers and the 1.5% biannual. What do you mean by 100%? Meaning during the construction phase or when it's operational?
When we were trying to come to an agreement on a formula, when the developer first came in, they were actually asking for the equivalent of $800 and some a door to be valued. By taking that up to 100% of the property's value for the multifamily, that's now the $1,400 a door that they would be paying, which is 100% valuation of the actual property. And I have verified that with Roger Rafferty.
Okay, so this is the valuation level, okay, not the abatement period, okay. And you hit one of the other questions I have regarding the hotel portion, because we've seen from previous developers or development concepts with mixed use and retail, is necessary to make the mixed use viable. In this aspect, we're having a hotel added to it, which is a little more incentive piece. None of these have any, I think you've said it already, there's no letters of intent on the retail or the hotel portion. Should this come through the council, through the proper process, through P&Z and all those other aspects, it would require each of these required, is it in totality, or each would require a review and approval for the apartments 100, the retail chapter 100, and the hotel chapter 100? They're not mutually exclusive. They all are tied specifically to each other.
I think it would all be within one agreement.
Okay. So you approve one, you approve all. Okay.
And the development agreement for that would have to reflect the interplay that we've just now talked about. If this doesn't go, it can't be this, it's got to be this, all the way around.
So what say do we have in who the tenants are? Particular to like the hotel piece, saying that there's a certain level of hotel that is expected.
They know the three that we are probably going to be proposing, the three flags, as he put it, to get a top-tier flag. There are three that are here. Once you get to four, you're stepping down some.
Okay.
There is the possibility that the retail component of this, the developer has a degree of incentive on making sure that they're sales tax generating, because they need that money. But we have contemplated that within the development agreement as well, as far as number of square feet that have to be retail sales tax generation. But they have their own reasons for, not to talk about you like you're not in the room, they have their own reasons for making sure there's retail sales in there.
I don't know, to me, it just seems like it's a build it and they will come kind of expectation.
That I would tell you kind of proudly, you know, not like, oh, shucks, you're right. Proudly on that is it working? On the multi-tenant retail, proudly, I'd say that's absolutely right. And it's a bunch of skin in the game, you know, millions of dollars to get it built. And yeah, and then you hope the tenants say, wow, that's good space.
Thank you.
Anyone else have anything? Yes.
So I know that they said if they do the apartments, then they're gonna do the retail. Do we have any way of guaranteeing that though? Like if the market crashes or something like that, is it where if they're like, hey, we built these apartments, but we're not gonna be able to do the rest of it, can then we go back and say, well, then your chapter 100 is gonna change because you're not completing the agreement to the way it was? Or is it just kind of a, hope they get it done within the time frame that they've done? I don't know if there's a way to.
I'll answer it. I've committed to all of these folks and Mr. Fearborn that if we're doing this project and you guys approve it as we presented it to you, that we would start the retail at the same time we're starting.
So not the time it's that on the presentation you show that the apartments would get done in 2025 and then the retail.
Maybe
would
we
start.
do some sort of tied completion or something like that, but sorry if we weren't very clear about that. But what I'm telling you is, yeah, we would be willing to start those at the same time, or make sure that we had occupancy at the same time, something along those lines. So before we could have occupancy on the last building or something like that, we would tie in that we had a certificate of occupancy, we were ready to occupy the,
time together, so that way there's some
do something
sort
like
of
that.
legal.
The phasing in the development agreement could incorporate that as well.
yeah, Kurt probably wants to hit me for saying that, but no, that's what I'm saying.
But it's
we would
real.
do.
That's a lot of guys and gals that squirm, and Jake just said no, tie those together. Now, because I am my role, I will say we've been really clear. The hotel, we're not building a hotel. Like
Right,
you have to find a flag, so
so I
that's
was looking
different.
at
But
the retail.
that retail in the southeast corner, that's right.
Yeah, we believe that we're going to be generating the demand for those retail services, those goods and services there, and us along with Watermark that we'll have across the street from us, that we're building that traffic that's going to be existing on Dean, that's going to, create some of the demand for this product.
Well, and just a side note, as a retailer, there's not a lot of options in Raymore that are empty. So
Kevin, did you?
Yeah, I guess really what you're saying is that the multifamily, people that move in there are going to be attracted by the retail, and the retail people are going to be attracted by the multifamily, so it's a nice synergy, do it all at the same time. And honestly, this type of product, we see it all over Kansas City, and I haven't seen any of them that aren't popular yet.
Said it for us. Yep.
Anyone else? Gentlemen, thank you very much. Oh,
Mr.
got one
sorry.
popped up down here. Okay.
it just-
Mr. Johnson.
What does this do to our ratio? Our housing ratio?
Currently, right now, with all the units that have been approved, not necessarily constructed yet, but approved and under construction, more or less, in total, the mix of non-detached, anything other than a single-family home, that makes up about 75% of our inventory, and the other 25 is anything but that. Within that 25% strictly apartment units, that number right now is, I believe, 6%, 5 to 6% of that overall non-detached single family. We haven't run the calculations to figure out what an additional 300 units would add to that, but I suspect it would be 6, 7%.
Nothing huge. Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. You got me.
Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you, gentlemen. We appreciate you. Good seeing you again. All right, next item on our agenda tonight is the development update on the Raymore Commerce Center. I'll turn it over to Mr. Feuerborn.
Thank you, sir. I'll give everybody just a chance to
Move around.
move around here.
All right.
And I'm going to let Mr. Keller tee this one up.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Van Trust here to talk about Newly, and then to talk about, is that not on?
There you go.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Brandon Keller, Economic Development Director, here to introduce Carl Lay and Justin Duff with Van Trust. They're here to give a rundown on Raymore Commerce Center and Raymore Commerce Center South. So I'll let them take it away, and then when they're done, feel free to ask them any questions you have.
Thank you, Brandon. Okay, so I'll start with,
Oh, I got you. Yeah.
we'll start with the first phase of Raymore Commerce Center. So we're looking south here, and Building 1 in the foreground was sold to Southern Glazers in October of 2021. Southern Glazers, I believe, continues to do their improvements in their building. I know that because I can see the dock levelers and dock doors getting reconfigured from our construction of our other two buildings. So Building 2 and Building 3. Building 3 was completed in October of 22 as a shell building, and the core and shell for Building 2 is nearing completion. We're looking at a March completion date for that core and shell building. And the exciting news for us and for Raymore is the announcement of Newly, Division of Urban Outfitters, announcing their intent to go into 600,000 square feet of the 1 million square foot Building 3. We say pending. They are actively working on design and engineering modifications and improvements that they're going to need to the building to support their use. So very exciting. We're working and supporting of them every step of the way. So this slide shows buildings 1, 2, and 3 on the left, and then of course Raymore Commerce Center, the next phase of development to the south, the additional buildings. So from a timing perspective, we are in the process of still evaluating market conditions, and we'll continue to evaluate market conditions. We have, in the first phase, we have all of Building 2 still vacant, which is just under 500,000 square feet. And in Building 3, we still have about 424,000 square feet available there. Continuing to market those spaces and continuing to get a seat or a shot at the RFPs that are coming into town from Raymore, and we feel Raymore continues to have a lot to offer and gives us a competitive place on those in responding to those RFPs, and so that's why we're excited about development on Raymore Commerce Center South. I would expect closing on the property late summer of this year. Probably design of Dean Avenue and the improvements of the extension of Dean Avenue to the south to serve this development. I could foresee happening before we close on the property, probably earlier in the summer. And I think that design process, depending on how long that takes, could put us in a position to be starting construction possibly late this year, but more likely early next year on the Dean Avenue extension work. Just another image of the property that I'm sure most of you have seen before. And that's the quick update. Turn it back over to Jim and team for any questions.
Brandon, can you briefly talk about the grant? And can you briefly give the council an overview of where Newly is at with us?
Yes. So in the image there, you can see the Dean Avenue extension wrapping around the old lift station, and that will be the access to 195th Street. So essentially, when you're going south on Dean Avenue, you will not have to stop anymore. It'll be a continuous, basically identical to it is on the other side of 49. So it'll allow for smooth travel and much easier access north and south through Raymore. So last year, the state of Missouri put out a grant application for MoDOT, which is the governor's cost share program. I essentially called Grant and I said, hey, I think we should take advantage of this. So Grant and I put together an application. We were awarded the 50% grant. As part of that, thanks to Van Trust and their investment, I was able to include the intersection and the lights at North Cass and Dean. So if you're wondering why hasn't the city started on that, it's because we're waiting on the state's grant to make sure that we can save city funds as part of that. And then another part of the agreement is to extend a little bit of the improvements on 195th further east to the elementary school. And so that'll be a couple of years away on that, but the light and the Dean Avenue extension is what we will, as soon as the state sends the application for that grant, it'll allow them to start working on the Dean Avenue extension and the city to get going on the light signals. So success there on Newly. So next week you will see the incentive application for Newly at the council meeting, and we're excited. Newly will have representation here from coming in from Philadelphia, so they're excited. Any questions you have on Newly on that, I'd be happy to answer that.
The reason I wanted Mr. Keller to update you all on both of those is to provide clarification on two things. Receipt of the grant on the light, the stoplight alone is hundreds of thousands of dollars that is now freed up that the council had already committed to that project that we're now going to receive through the grant. The reason I wanted the Newly update is because obviously we worked very hard at several different levels to try to get Urban Outfitters here, and it was, by Urban Outfitters' own admission, it was the groundwork that we laid to try to get the parent company here is the reason they were still very interested in Raymore and why we landed Newly. So huge thank you to that entire team for all the hard work that you all did in that. That being said, the council should remember Newly is not here because the governor says they're here. Newly is here when you all say Newly is here. So there's still work to be done there to make sure that that happens. Of course, the governor not only put out a press release on it, but Missouri Economic Development put out the press release that I had sent to you all, and then the governor included it in his State of the State address. So we want them here, but we want them here under you all's conditions, and I just wanted to make sure you understood that staff understands that condition is going to have to be in place. That concludes staff report on this item, sir.
You guys, Brandon, do you have something else?
Yeah, I just asked Carl if he could speak on the improvements that Van Trust has had to do to the building for Newly. And you'll probably learn this next week, but heavy electrical user, heavy water user. And Van Trust gave up quite a bit as well to get Newly here. And so they were a big player and a big investor in this as well. If you...
Yeah, sure. So, as Brandon mentioned, for what they do, Newly is a big user of power and a big user of water. And so they're going to have their own 6-inch tap to the water service that will extend to the Shell building, and then they'll take it from there as part of their TI. They also have additional, so we have one service right now for electrical that comes to the building. They need 2 services to the building, and so we'll put in, we have some kind of conduit and planned for future growth as part of the Shell building. So now it's actually making use of that conduit and those planned pads and working with Evergy to get the full second service installed. Which means if Newly takes 2 of them, we still have a vacant space. So then that means a third service goes into the vacant space so we can continue to market that space. And so Evergy has been a good partner at the table with that. And with all that water coming in, I should probably also point out that water, it tends to go out when it goes into a building. And so the City of Raymore sewer capacity and David, or Mr. Crass has provided, all the necessary will serve letters and engineering support of what the lift station can handle, and there's great capacity there. And so just having those utilities and being able to put those into play, Newly wouldn't have come here without having that capacity available. Oh, and natural gas, they also are a pretty good gas user, and so Spire is going to be reinforcing the main that goes down Dean Avenue and providing that service as well. So.
Anybody have any questions? See more of it on Monday night. John?
This may be a question for Newly later, but was there, I guess there was some talk of a retail component there as well too, a small retail component? And that.
Yes, sir. There is the possibility in the future for there to be a retail component.
Okay.
When consignment comes back, they have to figure out a way to get rid of it.
Roger that. Thank you.
Yep, Mr. Holman.
So spaces like what you've built and what you are building are obviously very popular across the Kansas City metro area, and I would guess other parts of the country as well. You all been in this business for some time. You got occupancy on, or I'm sorry, you got agreement on occupancy these pretty quickly after the building was finished or close to being finished. What's an average lead time? What would be your anticipation? A total of 8 buildings. What is an average lead time on some type of an agreement after the building's finished? And I realize it's an average and a guess.
Yeah, sure. So, and Justin, chime in if I'm wrong here, but typically we would expect that, after you build the building and the Shell building's complete, you target a 12-month lease up. But sometimes, the larger the building, if you're breaking it up, you might factor in that, 12 to 24 months, depending on, the market conditions. Fair?
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, gentlemen. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate you being here tonight.
All the deals in Raymore are like this one for me. Every real estate guy, I will do all.
Thank you. All right, did you have anything else to discuss this evening? Do we need to go into executive? Yes. Okay. So unless somebody else has something under item C, which is other, you care to bring up? I would request a motion to go into executive session.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Townsend.
move into executive session to discuss litigation matters authorized by revised Missouri statute 610.021, subparagraph 1.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Yes, sir. I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Holland. Motion's been made and seconded. Could I have the roll call, please?
Councilmember Townsend?
Yes.
Councilmember Wills?
Yes.
Councilmember Burke?
Yes.
Councilmember Forster?
Yes.
Councilmember Abdulgawad?
Yes.
Councilmember Barrett?
Yes.
Councilmember Barber?
Yes.
And Councilmember Holman.
Yes.
Okay, we'll move into executive session now.